I'm going anonymous here for shameful reasons. I was young, stupid and bored, and with a fast internet connection to boot. One page led to another, and I ended up on chat roulette. Next. I kept on clicking until I came upon this scantily clad chick looking as bored as I was. I chatted her up and she responded. We chatted for some time and she asked me if I had a Skype. Knowing the possibility of where this would lead to, I readily supplied. I had never sexted before and I felt this rush. Once on Skype, one thing led to another and we were both naked and doing all sorts of stupid things. Suddenly, though, her stream disappeared and I started watching a replay of me getting naked and making naughty faces on my screen. It turns out that I was sexting with a pre-recorded cam video of that girl, and a man was sitting on the other end. He had recorded all of my antics, and told me he had gotten access to all my Facebook contacts too, and that he would post the video to them unless I paid him some ridiculous amount of money. He went through a long list of my friends, and even identified some of my family members too. I begged him, on virtual knees, to show mercy. I swear I'll never do it again. It was my first time. I'm only a student, I don't even have any money. All fell on deaf ears, and he was stern with his request. Then I haggled on the price, and after some time, I ended up wiring £50, my entire life savings, through Western Union to one Yassine Bahrain, who lived in Morocco. Not my proudest moment, but I learned a lesson about online security, and I never sexted again. So, I've been receiving 5 to 6 spam calls per day for the past 3 weeks, all from different phone numbers. I typically don't answer. When I do answer though, it's always a robot from Microsoft saying that my quote subscription is going to run out and they'll charge me a huge sum of money if I don't do anything about it. And I always just end up hanging up. Well, Friday I was sick of it, absolutely done. So I answered, and it said to press 1 if I wanted to speak to a representative, so I did. A man answered, and I said as nicely as I could, "Hi, yes, I would like to be taken off your call list. I don't have any Microsoft products or subscriptions." I have no idea how any of this works. My husband made fun of me a little bit later for this, because they don't care if I want to be off the list. But anywho, this guy plays dumb for a while, and I start to get extremely frustrated. He says, "Oh, what's that? You'd like your subscription renewed?" and pretends that he doesn't understand what I'm saying. So then, I'm done, as I said before, so I raise my voice a bit and say, "Sir, take me off your list. I do not want calls from you ever again. I will call the police and report your phone number. Take me off." And then, it's like a switch went off. He went from playing dumb to creepy. His voice got really low and raspy, and my heart immediately dropped because I got so scared. He said, "No, you won't. You won't call anyone. And you know what else? You'll never get rid of me. I'll keep calling you day after day after day. You'll start looking for my call. You'll never get rid of me. Never." And then started to laugh, the creepiest laugh I had ever heard. I was in my car with my mouth agape because I was literally so startled by this, so it took me a minute to respond, and all I could think of to say was, "Yes, I will. I'll call the police. They'll find you." And he just laughed really hard and said, "Go fuck yourself," and hung up. I've been thinking about this for days, and I'm so creeped out. I've gotten several more calls, and after researching, I realized it was better to report him to the no-call registry folk than the police, so I did that, and I haven't answered any of his calls again, but I'm completely creeped out. It started with an email I initially thought was a phishing attempt. I put it in the trash, but took another look at it a few days later, and I realized it was legitimate. My application for an Amazon credit card had been granted, but I had not applied for one. I did some investigation, found out that someone had applied for several credit cards in my name. I was not notified about these applications, not by mail, email, or telephone, and they were all granted. Then I found out that someone had changed the addresses on my bank accounts, gasoline credit cards, and one major credit card. Interestingly, the new addresses were all the same, a slummy neighborhood a few miles away from my home. It appears to be an actual residence. It looks like some kind of place that meth addicts would live. I don't know the criminal's name, as he's using my name. It seems likely he has a fake ID with my name, and his address is on it too. This is interesting because it looks like it's a local job, not some cybercrime ring from Nigeria or Russia. If you're wondering, I don't actually do many financial transactions over the internet. PayPal, internet banking, and Amazon mostly. I don't have internet access to any of my credit card accounts. This is all rather disturbing, I've spent a long time on the telephone. If you ask, most banks and credit card companies will give you a, quote, personal password. I did that. I locked down my credit reports with all 3 major credit agencies. I set up 2-factor authentication with the small number of internet sites I do business with. It looks like the perpetrator knows my date of birth and social security number. I can't imagine where he got them. I've not had any computers lost or stolen. My best theories: 1, he or someone he knows got into my office and found some documents in an unlocked file cabinet, maybe a janitor or something. Or 2, he stole some mail from my mailbox. These are just theories though. I don't know if it's possible for a local thug to buy information like this, related to local addresses on the dark web. I'm now being more careful with documents in my office, and I got a locking mailbox at home. However, the damage is already done. As I said, he knows my date of birth and social security number. Once information like this is in the wild, I can never get it back again. I had a long talk with my bank. My life savings are in those accounts, as well as my retirement savings, all my working capital, everything. How was he able to just change the addresses on those accounts? I was surprised and disturbed by what I found out. It was apparently done over the telephone, but that isn't clear because banks don't keep detailed records of these transactions. Over the telephone, banks ask security questions. I think they might be computer-generated, based on information the bank and credit reporting agencies have on file. Apparently, if he had my name, address, social security, and date of birth, he had complete access. Banks and credit companies are pretty lax. If they say, "What is your mother's maiden name?" I can reply, "Gee, I was an orphan. I never knew my mother's maiden name." The bank might say, "Oh well, we understand. How about your social security number? Do you have that?" And so on. They will let you fail a number of security questions before denying access. If the perp happens to know a few of the answers, he just might get access. I later learned that a suspicious bank representative actually let the perp change my address, but then called me, left me a voicemail message, wanting to confirm that the change was legitimate. They left the voicemail on a Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. on the beginning of a 3-day weekend, on my business voicemail. I didn't get it until Tuesday morning. Needless to say, this was incredibly lame and lax. By then, the perpetrator had changed the billing addresses on other credit cards and accounts, and applied for many other kinds of credit in my name. I've talked with the local police. A young and pleasant officer came to my house, actually. He seemed concerned, but he was completely unprepared to cope with the problem. He was poorly trained and just guessed at what had gone wrong. He gave me a photocopy of a half-assed pamphlet about identity theft, containing the usual obvious advice. I asked him if the local police department had some kind of specialist to handle crimes like this. He was evasive, but the answer was obviously no. Beyond that, most local police departments, including mine, seem to consider these cases low priority. They don't have the resources or the motivation to pursue them. Since someone was tampering with my mailing address, I thought it might be a federal crime, so I tried reporting it to the Postal Service authorities too. I got as far as the USPS website. I tried reporting it on an incredibly shitty and user-hostile website. The Postal Service responded by holding my mail at the local post office without notifying me. I didn't get any mail for over a week, so I thought someone was stealing my mail every day out of my mailbox. This caused even more anxiety. I tried to talk it over with the local postmaster, and I normally defend the postal authorities, but this guy clearly did not give one single fuck. He just told me to visit the website and fill out a form. Of course I had already done that, and that's why my mail was missing in the first place. I eventually found out by accident that all my missing mail was being held at the post office. Today, I got a letter from Cross River Bank representing Best Egg, which appears to be some kind of loan company. Somebody, probably the same guy, just applied for a $5,000 home improvement loan in my name. Fortunately, the application was denied because I locked down my credit reports at the big 3 credit reporting agencies. I know a private detective who generously offered to look into the matter for me. Working from the perpetrator's address, the address he changed my bank accounts to, he was able to find out the perpetrator's name. He won't tell me the name, but he tells me that the local law enforcement is, quote, aware of the situation. My guess is that the perpetrator is on probation or parole, and the detective was able to have a friendly, off-the-record chat with the probation or parole officer. I don't know if this will go anywhere at all. The good news is, I haven't lost any money yet, and I guess my position is fairly secure now, though I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. So, there's my story. If you've been through something similar, you might find some of this information useful. My big picture comment is that the bank and credit security procedures are unbelievably lax. If local thugs have figured out how to commit this kind of fraud, this is going to get a lot worse before it gets any better. It's possible that no one really knows how to fix it. 2-factor identification seems to be the best idea going around, And that's a step in the right direction, but criminals are going to figure out how to bypass that too. My guess is that it's already a huge problem, but the banking and credit industries are trying to keep it quiet. My only remaining question is whether I should change my social security number. There's a mechanism for doing that, but it's not easy and there's some strict guidelines. I'm not sure if I'm even eligible, and it might be more trouble than it's worth. I hope this will turn into a conversation that's useful to others too. Many years ago, a much more naive and overly trusting version of me met a girl over the internet, and we got along right away. She told me a situation about her daughter needing to start school. I forget where, but she needed the money to buy this daughter's plane ticket to make this happen. I thought about it for a bit, and I ended up buying the ticket. Crazy thing is, I gave her my debit card info to do it. I know most of you just said, "No way." Yeah, I did. She thanked me for it, and she said that I really helped her out of a tight spot. About 2 days later, I checked my account and noticed about $600 was missing, and I knew that I didn't make the purchases. I confronted her about it, and she said that I had given her the right to buy whatever she wanted. We blow the roof off of this with a nasty argument that involves not just us, but also one of her friends. It was really nasty. I told her that I never wanted to talk with her again, and I was beyond angry with myself, that I would put myself into that position. It took a lot of prayer, because for a point I borderline hated women. I had to remind myself of who I was and that I could not let this define me, or how I would treat women in the future. It sucked. It really hurt. I was disappointed, but I decided to forgive myself and eventually move on. This is a short story from my childhood. Someone tried to steal my working NES. It was in the late 80s and I was about 9 or something. I had a quote friend call me up, invited me to his house so he could clean my NES. I thought it was strange, but he was very insistent and I didn't want to argue. I brought it over and he started cleaning the NES, and he asked me to get something from the kitchen, a butter knife I think. I went, found it after a few seconds of searching, and brought it back. He said he was finished and left the NES on the top of his TV, and left the room to go get something else. My NES looked very different. I stared at it for a bit, and it was missing a crack that had always been there. I looked on the floor where his NES was, and it had the crack. The fucker tried the old switcheroo. I tensed up, and I didn't really want to argue with this kid, because confrontation wasn't my strong point. I just switched them back as quickly as I could. He was gone for a while, and I actually had a lot of time to make it work. After he came back, I told him that I had to go, and I thanked him for the cleaning and went home. After about 30 minutes, he called my house again. He asked me which NES I took home. I told him that I took mine. He asked again, "Yeah, but did you take the one on the TV or the one on the floor?" I just told him again that I took mine. He sounded defeated as he said, "All right, bye," and hung up the phone. This happened to me a few years ago. I got hacked on Amazon, and it was brilliant. By some means, the attacker got access to my account, but they did not order any expensive item, because anything over $10 would trigger a notification to me, and they correctly anticipated that. So what they did was order very cheap items, not worth more than $1 or $2. They would order it using the stored credit card. Within a minute of ordering, they would then cancel the order, and Amazon gave them an option on how they would like a refund. Original method of payment, or as Amazon virtual currency. What they did was choose the latter. So money did not go back to my credit card, rather it started coming in as virtual Amazon currency. They bought lots of items this way, and kept on getting money back through Amazon currency. I think they accumulated around $600 to $700. Then they added a second shipping address to the account. There are different workflows if the existing address is modified versus a new address was added. In this case, since a new address was added, it did not ask for verification on the registered phone number. Finally, they bought something and shipped it off to Canada. How did I find out? Well, Amazon asked me, "Hey, are you sure you want to buy a car part and send it to Canada? Because both the location and the item are unusual compared to your purchase history." They sent me an email with the above question. It took me a while to understand what was going on. Canada? Why? I don't even own a car. I finally called Amazon and sorted things out. They canceled the order and removed all the false charges. Yeah, I got pawned, but I think it was brilliant. I was involved in an ATM scam in Delhi. 2 days back, my cousin went to an ATM. There was already a man completing his transaction there. After his transaction, he started counting his money in the corner of that room. He was taking too much time and my cousin was in a hurry. She asked that person to come outside. He showed her that he was counting money and exclaimed her to complete her transaction, and he shifted a bit more from the machine. She entered, and after completing her transaction, she was withdrawing the mini statement. Suddenly, he snatched her card from her and exclaimed, "This is not the right way to withdraw the mini statement." She yelled at him and asked her to return her card. He returned the card and left that place immediately. Also, there was no security guard outside the ATM. After about 20 minutes, she got a message that $24,000 was debited from her account. She was shocked as she didn't perform that transaction, and her last transaction was only about $500. She checked her card, which was with her, but she then soon noticed that it was not her card. Immediately, she understood that her card was swapped with a different one, and that person has done the swapping with extreme perfection. She didn't notice his trick, and he swapped the card in less than a second. I think the worst scam I ever saw was that my great-great-aunt, or grandmother's aunt, Hadley, was sending money to a former, quote, pastor from several years ago. He had written her a letter that he and his family had fallen on hard times when the church that they were preaching at burned down, and they were living in the church and lost everything. He was just trying to rebuild the church. She sent $20 the first time, but then the letter came more often and finally took on a threatening tone. When I found out about it, I Googled the guy, and he was dead. His son had found a list of the preacher's past parishioners and started to write to them, pretending to be his dad. All in all, she sent about $1,000 over the course of approximately 6 months. She was on a fixed income and living in income-based housing and couldn't afford this. There wasn't a lot the police could do, though, because she was willingly sending that money. I've seen a bunch of interesting small scams before. On my last trip to China in September 2017, I was accosted by 2 women in their 20s as I was walking in the Forbidden City. They initially said that they wanted to practice their English, and thus I let them walk with me. As I went through the monuments, they kept asking me more and more questions about myself, my company, and India. I was curious about what scam they were going to pull, and I was looking for that. Since China is quite safe for foreigners, and this was right around Tiananmen Square, their seat of power, I didn't feel quite threatened. I was fairly sure that I could call the cops any time. I made sure that we only walked in the bigger streets as we kept getting into the heart of Beijing. Then they took me to a restaurant. I just watched out for if they would drug me, and in any case put my WeChat and WhatsApp status as that location. I also made a call from there to a local friend just to let them know that my hosts know. Finally, the scam turned out to be outrageously priced menu items. I didn't need anything for fear of what might be there, but the bill for the 2 ladies came out to be somewhere around 100 yuan. Amidst much protest from them, I just said that we can only share the bill 3 ways, just departed with placing 300 yuan. There are many such tourist traps where these small scams go on, where unsuspecting tourists are brought in to buy ridiculously priced things and compelled to buy it out of guilt and persuasion. I wanted a new PS3 controller and decided to spend a bit more at a local used game store instead of going to GameStop. Sony was running a sale on them at the time. At GameStop, they were sold for $45. So I went to the local game store and told them that I needed a wireless PS3 controller. They pulled one off the shelf and said it was only $40. Everything looked good. Hot dog. I got home and opened it immediately. The entire wireless thing was completely missing. None of the lights worked, and the serial number matched up to a common Hong Kong serial number. I went back the next day and was like, "What the fuck is this?" They told me, "Oh, you didn't specify you wanted a Sony PS3 controller." I showed them the receipt, the box, the controller. All of them said it was a Sony controller, but it wasn't. They refused to do anything but sell me another one for $55. I tried contacting BBB and shit, but no luck. I emailed Sony, who said they weren't an authorized dealer, so nothing they could do either. Lesson learned. I wrote them plenty of bad reviews and let them stay there online until they went out of business a few years later. Quite a few years ago, I was supplementing my income by doing digital photography editing for models. While I did receive a handful of bizarre requests, like the one from a guy who seemed like he was trying to augment his dating site profile, most of my clients were straightforward and honest. That state of affairs lulled me into a false sense of security, and it left me open to getting scammed out of hours of work. The individual who ultimately ripped me off was billing herself as a plus-size model and an entrepreneur, and she wanted me to touch up some images for her business's website. To this day, I don't know what that, quote, business actually did, given that the page in question seemed like it was just a clunky invitation to meet the woman at whatever nightclub she happened to be frequenting. Before you ask, no, she wasn't a prostitute. She was just the self-proclaimed, quote, sexiest soul sister in the city, who was apparently pretending that she was some sort of celebrity. Still, she offered me a decent amount of money for what should have been a fairly brief project, so I took the job. Now, I know that I should have been wiser about this. Like I implied, I was a little bit naive. But after I had finished the pictures, I sent them over to the woman for her approval. She said that she was happy with them, then asked if I would edit a few more, saying that she would double my fee for the trouble. Once again, I agreed. But when the time finally came for me to get paid, things started going downhill. The first excuse I received was that my client was waiting for her latest paycheck to clear. Not long after that, she claimed that she didn't have a PayPal account to begin with, then said that she'd send me a check via standard mail. A couple of weeks passed after that, and when I had finally asked where my payment was, she responded by saying that it must have gotten lost in the mail. Finally, when I asked her to send me a money order with a tracking number, she insinuated that I was trying to scam her by attempting to trick her into paying me twice. Needless to say, I was a bit irritated, not least of all because her excuses didn't make any sense. That same woman reached out to me again about a month later too, with a request for an animated banner. I told her that I would be happy to assemble it, but that she would have to compensate me for my previous work, and as she had done before, she said that she would double what she already owed me if I would finish her project first. Fortunately, I had learned my lesson, so I wrote back to her by stating that while I appreciated her generosity, I'd really need upfront payment this time around. Her response was a long-winded message which suggested, amongst other things, that I was trying to scam her, and that it was hilarious how she had scammed me, that I was not particularly well endowed, that I had probably pleasured myself to the images I had already seen, and that she was going to sue me for copyright infringement. She signed off by promising that I would be hearing from her lawyer in the very near future. I can only assume that their correspondence got lost in the mail too.